You're watching WisconsinEye, an independent, nonprofit public affairs network, engaging the citizens of Wisconsin since 2007 through access to government proceedings and public policy events.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And I want to get started with talking a little bit about what WisCI is, for our viewers who aren't familiar with what you guys provide.
WisconsinEye is essentially C-SPAN for Wisconsin. So we are one of a handful of state capital broadcast networks in the country at the state level. And we've been doing this now since May of 2007. Consistently, we've seen a lot. We've seen politicians come and go. But the bottom line to all of this is our mission, which is to provide transparency and citizen access to what happens in the state capitol. You know, every biennium, tens of billions of dollars is spent in taxpayer money that affects everybody throughout the state of Wisconsin. And so we believe that access to that as it happens, as it unfolds, is really important.
And right now you guys are facing some funding challenges. Talk to us a little bit about what that looks like.
You bet. There is a high competition right now for the philanthropic dollar throughout the state of Wisconsin and essentially throughout the country. So what's going on right now is there were a number of community-based projects that went into hibernation during the pandemic for good reason. Donors were very skittish. Well, those projects started to emerge in the last 18 months or so, along with new projects. So whether it's Dane County or whether it's Green Bay or La Crosse or Racine, Kenosha, what we're finding is that there are competitive philanthropic campaigns going on, sometimes in the tens of millions of dollars. I mean, WisconsinEye needs to raise $1 million to meet our annual operating budget. And you would think that'd be pretty easy. There's a lot of wealth in the state of Wisconsin, but really it's highly competitive right now. And we're working our hardest to meet budget. On top of that, there's $10 million sitting in a state account with our name on it in a dollar-for-dollar match to create a permanent endowment. That will be the glorious day when WisconsinEye has a $20 million endowment in place, and we won't have to worry about month to month as those dollars earn interest. So right now, we're essentially competing against ourselves, as well as all of those other community-based projects. And we've never been first in line. I mean, we're not rooted in a local community raising money for the homeless. We're not meeting those societal needs. That's not our mission. At the same time, we don't have this loyal alumni base with a really high-power machine to go out and raise money. And so we're middle of the pack, as it were, and fighting hard, clawing to get to the front of the line.
And what would it mean if you guys weren't there? For people who don't necessarily fully understand what your mission is and what you do, what would it look like if WisconsinEye wasn't at the Capitol? Well,
the biggest thing would be transparency goes away, because there's truth in what happens gavel to gavel. News reporters rely on WisconsinEye to tell the story of what happens in the Capitol. And what we've seen over the years is that as resources in newsrooms across the state have been diminished and technology has changed, that state capitol press room used to be a beehive of activity, and now there's just a handful of reporters. The other reporters who write about what happens in the state capitol can do it remotely because they're watching WisconsinEye Live. So to answer your question more directly, the biggest losers are those who care most about the inputs and outcomes of state government. So I would put on that list the commercial news media, advocacy organizations around the state, and the people of Wisconsin, because you will not have the opportunity to see as many public hearings as they occur. You would not essentially hear the voice of the people. And so if WisconsinEye goes away, that access goes away. And let's quantify that for a sec. So in the last 2.5 years, WisconsinEye has had 320,000 unique visitors to our website. We have delivered more than 2.5 million website views. We have 40,000 members in our social media communities. So we know there's a high interest in WisconsinEye, and those viewers would not have this resource because there's nothing else like it in the state.
And you mentioned, too, it's very unique across the country. Talk to me a little bit about that. Not every state has a resource like this.
They don't, and ours is actually made history back in 2007 as launching as the nation's only first and independent, truly independent, non-government owned, non-government controlled broadcast network from the state capitol. Why is that important? Well, the party in power drives the legislative agenda, and the party in power controls how those networks operate, and the party in power controls the funding of those networks. And so there used to be an organization called the National Association of State Capitol Networks, NAPAN. And when we would get together on an annual basis, they would look at WisconsinEye and say, boy, we wish we were like you with that independence. And we would say, oh, we wish we were like you with the resources. So we're the smallest of all of them. And by all means, they're very good networks. But ours is a very unique model. And it was a model by design by state legislators, the governor, and those constituents who care about transparency in Wisconsin government. And so we have a staff that is outnumbered 3-4-fold by those other networks. They have 5 times the budget. We've got 5 staff members running a budget of just under $1 million to deliver an exceptional amount of quality gavel-to-gavel coverage from the Capitol. And we do other things that wrap around that core mission. So to give added perspective and context, we invite studio interviews with decision makers and advocates for issues. We cover campaigns and elections like nobody else in this state. We covered 640 campaign events in the last 2 years. So we provide a service that not only is an eye on what's happening as it occurs in the Capitol, but a whole lot of programming that wraps around that. And so we are passionate about our mission. We believe in the Constitution and the First Amendment, and we want diverse voices that really bring people to a common table and solve problems for the state.
And you talked about competition being an issue here, but are there other factors that kind of drove you to this point of needing significant help with fundraising?
Well, bottom line is funding. We've made multiple requests, dozens of requests. There's a trend that's been occurring in our state, and I don't think it's unique to Wisconsin. But there are foundations and individuals who in the past supported WisconsinEye. But as we have seen in the last couple of election cycles, things have become incredibly divisive with a whole lot of out-of-state money and record-breaking political fundraising here in Wisconsin. So what that means for us is some of those donors are now either by choice or by pressure are giving directly to candidates, campaigns, and causes. Those people and those organizations that advocate hands-on directly for issues. Well, we don't advocate for candidates, campaigns, or causes. We tell the story. We put the spotlight on that. And so where there is pressure to make a decision in the donor's mind, the trend has been away from the transparency side of the equation and much more out of that balance, if you will, toward directly impacting candidates and campaigns. And that has been a bit of a frustration for us because, as I noted, there have been some very generous donors in the past and foundations who look at WisconsinEye now and they say, no, thank you. And we turn around and look at what they are supporting. And ironically, some of those organizations rely on WisconsinEye's coverage to do their advocacy and their messaging to their stakeholders. So in a sense, the very organizations that some of these funders are funding are organizations that rely on WisconsinEye, and yet those funding sources look over us.
And I want to ask, too, are there any organizations that you would turn down for funding right now who maybe, as you said, a very divisive political climate that make things like, oh, you feel like you would be pressured to a certain way, or is that not an issue for you guys?
Not an issue, and in fact, this goes all the way back to the beginning. As we looked at Madison and Dane County as one of our lead regions to help launch this network, it's really funny because some of the groups that supported us very generously were the Wisconsin Education Association Council, the Teachers Union, Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, AFSCME, Labor Union, None of those organizations have ever tried to exert influence on our programming or on our coverage decisions. They just believe that that open forum is really essential to a strong democracy. And so today, we would not turn down dollars necessarily from anyone. I mean, one of the largest donors over time to WisconsinEye has been Diane Hendricks. She's a First Amendment person, believes strongly in what our Constitution says about the right of the people to speak and to be heard. She has been our most generous donor over time and has never once intimated a desire to question or challenge or exert pressure on programming. So the door's open to all who have a checkbook and who would like to make a contribution.
And where does your fundraising stand right now? How are you guys doing?
Month to month, we're good through the end of the year and into the first quarter of next year on our operations budget. After that, and that's why the appeal went out. The other thing that's happening in the donor environment is donors are reluctant to make multiple year commitments. So that's a budgetable kind of thing. If we could get a donor to say, well, we'd like to make a gift for the next 3 years of this amount, that is a great stress reliever for our budget. There are none of those on our books right now, where in the past those were fairly numerous. And so we're just fighting against a really tough environment. We are good through into and through the first quarter of next year on meeting our monthly. And then beyond that, time will tell.
Well, wonderful. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Only that we look to Madison and Dane County as really the anchor for the creation of WisconsinEye. There are a couple of really cool moments in our creation. One of those was when now deceased developer George and Candy Jalamis here in town really caught on to the idea of helping WisconsinEye. And they said, well, let's do a party. And so in their home, they hosted our first fundraiser. And it raised a significant amount of money. And George looked at me and he said, if we're going to do this, we have to have an attraction. And I said, well, who would you like to have? He said, let's bring in Walter Cronkite. So we did. And Walter Cronkite stole the show. He was wonderful. And it was just a wonderful start to WisconsinEye. But there have been others. Lori Benson and Intercom Company donated computers. Jonathan and Susan Lipp at Full Compass donated all kinds of equipment. We had other pro bono supporters. Godfrey Kahn, the law firm here in town, the Bakke family. The list goes on and on. And I should stop now because I know I'll forget some. But Madison's been very generous to Wisconsin, including the Evue Foundation. Can't say enough about their early support as well. But we look to all of them now to say, would you step up with us again? Because this is more important than ever before. There's this cry for save our democracy. And that means a lot of things to different people. And in that mix of a cry for more civil dialogue and concerns over gerrymandered legislative districts and out-of-state campaign funding, in that mix, WisconsinEye has a role to play, which is to always provide open and transparent look at state government. And so we think that we're part of that march toward a stronger, better democracy for everyone. And we're just hoping that people can connect with our message and be supportive.
Thank you for taking the time to come and
My
chat
pleasure.
with us today.
Yeah.
This program is a production of WisconsinEye, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit media network with a mission to inform, educate, and engage the citizens of Wisconsin. WisconsinEye is the nation's first and only independently funded state civics broadcast network, providing gavel-to-gavel access to government proceedings and events at the state capitol.